Hey guys, Bison Pair bring you this 11.0.5 Breath of Sindragosa raid guide. I've been progressing as Frosty K on court at the moment, so I feel like now it was an appropriate time to make a proper video talking about all the little bits and pieces that goes into playing Breath of Sindragosa well in a raiding environment. We're going to talk about talents, trinkets and gear, rotation, opener, and tips and trick and all that kind of thing to help you optimize your Breath of Sindragosa DPS. Anyway, starting out with talents, we have the kind of standard setup. The class tree is quite flexible as normal, but whenever you get interrupts, you do want to pick up both interrupt and cold first, so you can get some extra running power from there. In the spec tree, there's essentially two choices to be made. You have the option to go for Frostwing's Fury whenever you got some intermittent adds. In that scenario, you do need to pick up bonus efficiency, which is a bit more passive gameplay, but it also relies a bit more on RNG to get long breaths. The standard build is just Inexorable Assault with Horn of Winter, and that's fine to run on pretty much every single boss. It also gives you a bit more agency. If you get some bad luck, you can tweak your usage of Horn of Winter to keep your breath going. When it comes to trinkets, we have two options to do here. Either we do double on use, or we do single on use and passive. Double on use is specifically good for bosses where your burst is concentrated in your 4 to 5 second window. Court, for instance, is a really good example of this, where the boss takes increased damage, and that happens on a 4 to 5 second cycle, which means the double on use is specifically good there. Same thing with Overnax, you have the adds coming in every 4 to 5 seconds, and having a trinket for each and every one of those is a big upgrade. As a general rule though, you can also run a on use and then a passive. For your on users, it's Treacherous Transmitter, that's the best one by far. You get some more stats, but you do have to, do the actual task it gives you, but I think that's generally fine in a raiding environment. We also have Mark of Kadros, and we have Skarmorak Shard. They are completely, just press them and get the buff, and there's no real usage to them. For the passive, it's definitely Overnax Mercurial Egg, that's the best one. It depends on how you move, whether or not it gives you primary stats or your higher secondary stats. As a general rule, if you want to optimize it, make sure to have 15 stacks of each-ish, and then also use it for your breath windows. So you don't need to care about moving around, so you kind of fix the stats in place. We have Arakara and we have Shadow Binding Ritual Knife, which are good options as well for passive trinkets. Now, with stats, it's quite simple. We absolutely love Critical Strike. There are just a lot of things that synergize well with crit in the Frost DK kit. You have Killing Machine, Natural Procs, you have like loads of various things in the kit that all benefit from more crit autos or just more critical strikes. And that means that you tend to not, there is generally no cap on how much crit you want to get. Obviously it's a sim question, but as a general rule, if you see crit, that tends to be what you want. Now for the rotation, let's have a look at the opener. I got it up here. We start out with Abomination Limb. This is essentially because that doesn't use a rune, so we want to use that before we use Remorseless Winter, because otherwise we wouldn't gain, that would be like an empty GCD for Gathering Storm. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Anyway, we pop on Remorseless Winter, and then we use as many Obliterates as we can. You will get some procs there sometimes, where you get rune refund off your Obliterates. Just keep going until you're out of runes. And also use every Howling Blast proc that you get from them. When you're out of runes, you will have one left. Use that on Death and Decay just to make sure you use all of your runes. And then you press your breath macro, which I got up here. You want to use this on an open GCD. It's going to use your breath, it's going to use your pillar, trinket, racial, and it's going to use your Reaper's mark. It's important that it's on an open GCD because you do want to be GCD efficient as you can in your pillar window. It's a bit that Obliteration style where ideally you want to spend every GCD in the window to maximize the damage-ish. After this point, right, in your opener, you're going to be quite flooded on resources. And you have kind of two competing priorities here. So since you're playing Obliteration with Breath, pressing Howling Blast generates Killing Machine, which is a lot of damage in this pillar window. Like, ideal scenario is that you hit Obliterate, you get a Rhyme proc, Howling Blast, and then Obliterate, get a Rhyme proc, and Howling Blast, back and forth and back and forth. And you will get also some natural Killing Machine procs. That does happen. Just a very specific scenario here is that if you end up on loads of runes, you can actually hit naked Howling Blast to generate Killing Machine. It's a tiny bit of optimization, but it kind of makes sense because you could hit a naked Obliterate, which does like no damage. But if you do Howling Blast and then Obliterate, that's just going to do a lot more. As I said, you don't do this very often. It's specifically good in AoE scenarios and in single target if you have lots of runes available, but it is a thing, and it's something you can pay attention to. With your Reaper's Mark, that's going to stack up really quickly, which means that, halfway through your pillar, you're going to get some nice Killing Machine plus Exterminate procs. I would still ideally use those with Killing Machine, so even though you get the Exterminate proc, since you're going to get the halfway through the pillar, you don't need to stress about it. Generally, you will get your Rhyme procs and then can use those on those Obliterates. Or you would also just hit naked Obliterates if your breath is ticking down your runic power. That's also going to be fine. But I say as a general rule, you kind of don't need to care about your runic power at this stage. The one thing to do care about is not overcap wildly. So it's not like you sit down, you spam Obliterates and overcap loads of runic power. That is going to hurt your breath down the line. Right, after this point, your breath is ticking down and you're going to keep you up by hitting Obliterate. And you can expect to get around 30 to 45 seconds on your first breath. I think the main thing to pay attention to is how you use Obliterate versus other abilities like Howling Blast with rank procs, right? If you're not healthy on runic power above 60, it's completely fine to press Howling Blast with rank procs. But if you go below 60, you definitely want to prioritize Obliterate for sure. This also holds true a little bit lower, like if you want to prioritize Obliterate versus how to Remorseless Winter, or Soul Reaper in Execute, for instance. If you're really low on runic power, you want to hit Obliterate, but it can also be a good idea for Remorseless Winter and Soul Reaper at this point if you just have a single rune and that gets you above the threshold to get another tick, and then maybe get a proc so you can use Obliterate again, and so on and so on. I think the primary choice is when to hit Horn of Winter. It gives you 2 runes and some runic power, and the general vibe is to do it as soon as you run out of runes and you can press it without overcapping. This is going to happen, generally a bit after pillar. You're going to reach a scenario where, okay, I've used all my runes, my breath is ticking, and I can't press anything. That's when you press your Horn of Winter. You're also going to have a look at using Anti-Magic Shell. Any bad damage comes through, you can soak up that and give you some more runic power, helps keep your breath. But as a general rule, it's a bit RNG. If your breath drops or not, you get some procs and it keeps going. Sometimes a bit longer, sometimes a bit shorter. That's the general vibe. But I think as a general rule, right, your breath window is contained to 45 seconds. So you generally won't actually have it for your second pillar window unless you're quite lucky and you manage to play around mechanics for it. Alright, I don't think it's too complicated with breath, honestly. As I said, that opener pillar, there's some choices you can make with your Howling Blast usage. Afterwards, it's all about timing your Horn of Winter correctly. Do try and be a bit quite aggressive with it. I think that's a good tip, but otherwise, it is generally quite straightforward. Alright, so after your initial breath, you're going to go into this standard Obliteration rotation, hitting a Obliteration window at the 45 seconds mark and at the 1 minute 30 second mark. For these windows, it's very similar to when you play the standard Obliteration. You're going to use a macro to initiate them. Again, this is to be GCD efficient so that you essentially don't waste any GCDs in the pillar, because losing out on just a single ability is going to be quite hurtful. I got one here, it's with Reaper's Mark. Again, that's the standard nowadays. We used to have loads of different ones like Froststrike and Howl Blast and that kind of thing, but now we also always use Reaper's Mark with your pillar. I will say, saving up enough resources for a pillar window is crucial. So before the actual pillar comes off, you do want to save up runes for it. If you go into pillar with like only 2 runes, you're going to quickly starve and you're not going to be able to make a lot of use of it. So instead, always dump your runic power before your pillar comes up. Make sure you can also sit there and wait for a couple of seconds to make sure that you don't go into the pillar window with too little resources. This one is a bit special. The 1 minute 31 is going to be easier because we have Horn of Winter for that one. But on this one, you definitely want to make sure you have sufficient resources before you enter the window. Once you're in the window, the rules are quite simple. If you have a Killing Machine proc, spend that ASAP. If you don't have one, you want to generate one, use Howling Blast, Froststrike, Soul Reaper in specific scenarios. But those are the buttons you're going to press to generate one. As a general rule is, if you have a Rhyme proc, press Howling Blast. If you don't, press Frost Strike. If you have loads of runes and you unexecute, you can press Soul Reaper. That's the general priority. And then it's just going to be consume, generate, consume, generate. That's the vibe. Now, at the 1 minute 30-second mark, you are going to want to do this again, but you have Horn of Winter for this. And you want to use that before the window if you don't have a lot of resources. So in general, you don't have that lot of resources, so that's a good point. Use Horn of Winter, make sure to maximize that pillar. And then, at the 2:15, that's the next time you use Breath. We do say Breath for 15 seconds to sync it up with your pillar. It does depend a little bit on the exact fight time and things. You don't want to delay your Breath and lose out on a cast, but in general, you do always delay it to 2:15. You're also going to delay on use, so you have like a 1 minute 30 on use. You're going to save that for the 2:15 mark. But it's quite nice when you have double on use, because then you can just alternate, and then you will have your second on use ready for 2:15. And then you can repeat what you did in the opener. Make sure to save a lot of resources. You want to be at like 70, 80 runic power. When you enter that Breath, you're going to have a... It's not going to be as easy to keep up, because you obviously don't have Lost at that point. But it's going to be the same thing where you're using Power Weapon with your Breath. You're going to use the macro. Use Horn of Winter when you quite aggressively, when you don't have any runes and it doesn't overcap you. And again, if you get loads of procs and loads of runes, you can consider using Naked Howling Blast in that initial pillar window to generate some killing machine procs for you. Alright, that's the general how to use Breath and how to use a pillar. Let's also talk about Remorseless Winter, because that also has quite a bit of impact in your rotation. Remorseless Winter specifically is quite amped up by talents, and it's going to be Everfrost and Glacial Gathering Storm you're going to care about. They essentially mean that if you reuse Remorseless Winter quite quickly after the previous one drops, it's going to give you lots of value from Everfrost. And if you manage to extend Remorseless Winter long enough, you can actually refresh it at 10 Gathering Storm stacks and gain a lot of value. That's going to mostly happen when you have your Breath up. The ideal scenario is to press Remorseless Winter just before your Breath, and then, like in the opener, we did a little bit before, but that's fine. And then you can use it off Obliterate, so you extend Remorseless Winter to the point where it comes off cooldown, you can press it again, and then it refreshes at full duration with 10 stacks of Gathering Storm. You definitely want to be able to do this in the opener. You're going to do it at least once. With Bloodlust, you're going to do it twice. That's the general vibe. That's a good rule. You are going to want to press Remorseless Winter frequently to keep up your Everfrost. I would say that due to it being 20 seconds and pillar being 45, ideally you want to sync it up so that you do refresh Everfrost, but you also sync it up with your pillar to beef it up. So you can delay it a couple of seconds, as long as that also doesn't drop your Everfrost, to make sure it syncs up with your pillar correctly. Alright, that's pretty much Breath of Sindragosa. Let's in single target. Let's talk about Cleave, right? What happens? What's the difference? The main thing is that Deafening K is going to be used a lot more. For every pillar frost window, you want to use Deafening K before you press that macro. It lasts for 14 seconds. We're not using the long pillar with a build, so it's going to overlap it completely. So Deafening K, and then use the macro, and then you just go into cleaving. In a general raining scenario, if you have a lot of cleave, like on court, you are going to use Deafening K quite a lot. It has such a cooldown, so you just pop it down frequently. I would generally wait until I have a killing machine before I pop it down, so I get some extra good value. Alright, so that is Breath of Sindragosa in a raid environment for you guys. Let me know down in the comments anything that you do differently than me. Any tips and tricks you want to give your fellow raiders, let me know. Upvote, downvote, consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.